I'm gonna tell you guys 10 PS1 games that are worth playing on your PS Vita while social distancing. Listen, I know it sucks being stuck inside the house. I'm starting to go a little crazy myself. Hopefully these games will hold you guys over until everything returns to normal. And as a quick note, some of the games I'm about to mention can be downloaded straight from the North American PlayStation Network. So please, no need to mod your Vita. Number 10. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. It's cool how you can use things around the environment to finish off the enemies. You can throw them in water, off a cliff, set them on fire, or impale them with a weapon. It's gruesome, but it's fun to watch. The game is easy to control for the most part. I do wish there was a way to reverse the camera though. I can never get used to that. Also, I really hate the dodging mechanic. It works, but whenever you shift to either side, the input on the D-pad changes, so then you gotta rethink what direction left and right are. I think it makes the game harder than it really is. Graphics are some of the best you'll find for a PlayStation 1 game. Great looking effects on characters and beautiful lighting throughout the stages. The only problem is that it's so depressing to look at. The color palette could have used a little more variety in my opinion, but I guess that's what the underworld looks like. It's good if you're into that kind of thing. I didn't have a problem with the frame rate at first since it only occurred when entering or leaving an area, but later on it actually became more of a pain as you'll find it happen quite frequently throughout. So not only is the dodging awkward, but now you also have to deal with an inconsistent frame rate. It really dampens the gameplay. What I really like about the game, however, is the way the story is told. You're brought back from the dead on a quest for vengeance. Things have drastically changed while you've been away, and now you're trying to figure out what happened. And let me just say, that has to be one of the coolest looking menu screens. I mean, check out the faces on the statues. That's awesome. Number 9. Medieval. The first thing I thought of as I was playing this was Gex Enter the Gecko. Who remembers that game? I'll admit, Medieval was not easy to get into at the beginning, mainly because of the weird camera. You can spin it freely, but sometimes it can get stuck when you're in a tight corner. The visuals, although might have been amazing at the time of release, haven't aged all that well in my opinion. I mean, it's okay. It's not the worst. The gameplay is where it's at, and Medieval definitely succeeds in that department. It's a fun action-adventure, hack-and-slash game that surprisingly still holds up even today. What I really enjoyed about the game was just how easy it was to pick up and play. Simple controls and easy to understand objectives make it appealing to a broad range of gamers. You run around attacking enemies with various weapons, all while trying to collect key items to progress to the next level. Nothing too complicated. The audio includes an excellent soundtrack with numerous voiceovers that really give the game personality. If you're like me and happen to miss it back during its initial release, then now's your chance to finally give Medieval a try. I mean, what else are you gonna do inside the house? Number 8. Strider 2. When I first played this game, I thought to myself, there's no way this is worth the price it's going for on eBay. People are asking for upwards of $80+ for this game. My question is, why? I mean, some of the bosses are pretty cool, but overall, the control and limited number of sprites really show the game's age. Everything feels so rigid and stiff. Like, there's only one direction you can swing your sword in. The game is also super difficult. A lot of times you die simply because you're not sure what's even going on. It's hard to differentiate what's in the background when everything sort of just blends together. Is it an enemy or is it a power-up? Luckily, there's an infinite amount of continues, so you'll have plenty of tries to make it to the end. But even then, that's still a challenge. Some levels are just plain frustrating. I was about to lose all hope when I remembered the game actually came with a second disc. That's right, the game defaults to the first disc, which includes the first Strider. Hold down the PS button and reset the game to switch over to the second disc, which is the real reason you'd want to pick up this game. Introducing Strider 2. I think the first game was like the original arcade version or something. I don't know. Anyway, Strider 2 is where you'll want to spend the bulk of your time. Everything here is just better. Music and sound effects have been given a huge upgrade. Controls feel tighter, and graphics have been given a new, pseudo 3-dimensional look. The gameplay is closer to what you'd expect from the Strider remake that was released a few years back. Although Strider 2 is an excellent game, I still don't think it's worth the price it's going for on eBay. I do, however, think it's worth the $5.99 on the PlayStation Network. You're given a few missions to choose from upon starting the game, with more opening up as you go. Levels are quick and to the point, with each one ending in a cool looking boss fight. And may I also add, the illustrated cutscenes are simply beautiful. Being stuck inside the house, I feel this is the perfect opportunity to catch up on some classic, old school 2D side-scrolling action. Number 7. Ridge Racer Type 4. The fourth game in the Ridge Racer series and the last to be released on the original PlayStation. If you're familiar with how Ridge Racer plays in previous games, then you'll notice a slight difference when going into Type 4. Now, I'm not an expert at Ridge Racer, so please don't be offended if I'm unable to explain this correctly. You'll notice the speed and drift mechanic are not as extreme as they once were in past entries. If anything, they're a little bit tamed in comparison. Car collisions now result in this odd way of wobbling back and forth. It happens when you come in contact with another car or the side of the track. It's weird at first and it does take some time getting used to. Also, the corner drift mechanic that's so well known in previous games are not as intense as they once were. I mean, you're still able to drift, but the feeling of basically hugging the wall isn't really there anymore. The game is trying to find a nice balance between arcade and sim, but unfortunately doesn't really do either one very well. Still, I did enjoy my time with it. Races do get a lot better, and even though the sense of speed isn't as fast as I would have hoped, the beautiful graphics make driving through each course worth it. From a visual perspective, Ridge Racer Type 4 is a knockout. Wonderfully realized environments really bring this game to life. The Tokyo-inspired racetrack is just amazing. The music is also very nice as well. Soothing jazz that perfectly complements the methodical racing. If there's one thing I'm a little disappointed about is that the game doesn't come with the extra bonus turbo mode. For those who bought this back on the PS1, there was an extra disc that came with your copy of Type 4 that included the original Ridge Racer running at 60 frames per second. It was a nice little bonus, and it's a shame that it wasn't included in this download as well. Number 6. Medal of Honor Underground. If you like the first game, then you're definitely gonna like this one. I think it might be a prequel, I'm not sure. This time you play as a girl, which doesn't make a difference since you can't really see your character. What you will notice is the attention to detail that went into creating this game. Similar to its predecessor, the production quality is of the highest caliber. I'm not the biggest fan of World War first-person shooters, but even I was rather impressed. Released at the tail end of the PS1 generation, you can tell every last bit of resource was being squeezed out of Sony's 32-bit console. Graphics look even better than they did the first time around. From the way you reload a weapon, to the way glass shatters, right down to the explosions, Underground features some of the best 3D visuals you'll see in a PlayStation 1 title. The sound design is amazing as well, as it does a good job of immersing you into the setting. Moving orchestral music combined with arousing weapon effects help to intensify the action. The controls are good for the most part. The game makes excellent use of the dual analog sticks, but some of the aiming can be rather difficult. I don't know, maybe I'm just terrible at this game. Also, I think the addition of an on-screen map would have helped tremendously. Since most of the game takes place at night, it can be difficult finding your way around sometimes. Other than that, I think the game is amazing. If you're a fan of World War first-person shooters, picking up Medal of Honor Underground is a no-brainer. Number 5. Silent Hill. I like how the game doesn't waste any time getting started. Upon hitting the start button, you immediately realize you're in a creepy, deserted town looking for your daughter. It's so easy to lose your way at the beginning. There's just so much fog. I mean, it makes sense because of how the story is told, but man, is it difficult to see. You can't walk more than a few feet without having to bring up the map every single time. Sometimes you just feel like you're running down an endless road. I think the feeling of not knowing where you're going is what this game does really well. It's brilliant though, because the sense of panic and anxiety it creates is pretty rare in games today. Luckily, things are marked for you on the map so you sort of have an idea of where you need to go. I'm gonna be honest with you guys here. I had to YouTube a walkthrough because I couldn't find the house key that's located in the doghouse. I mean, how the heck was I supposed to know you had to read the message at the end of the street for the key to appear? Like, how would anyone know that? I will admit, Silent Hill has some of the most disturbing camera angles used in the video game. There's an uneasy, unnerving, stress-inducing feeling that it creates. Some of it even made me a little dizzy. I know, I'm so weak. I don't quite like it as much as Capcom's popular zombie franchise, but if you're a horror fan and want something a little more unnerving, then Silent Hill is definitely worth checking out. Number 4. Mega Man Legends. Your traditional 2D platformer turns 3D action adventure with a nice sprinkling of RPG elements. There's a heavy emphasis on storytelling as you'll be talking to various people around town, picking up items, rescuing civilians, and fighting gigantic robots. I got sort of a Power Stone kind of vibe when I started playing. The game is set in the distant future where the Earth is mostly surrounded by water, and civilization's primary energy source are quantum refractors. It's the diamond-looking thing you'll be searching for throughout most of your adventure. And I say adventure because that's what it really feels like. The game is massive compared to the Mega Man platformers you've been accustomed to. At times, it might even be a little overwhelming with how much freedom you're given. Talk to one person over here, and they'll ask you to go run an errand elsewhere. It might seem tedious, but it's actually quite fun. Some indoor environments might look a little drab, but the outdoor scenery looks great. I think it's because the game was going for a cartoony art style. Whatever the case, I still find the graphics appealing and easy on the eyes. Unfortunately, as great as this all sounds, there is a learning curve. On the original PS1, the controls took a while to master, and on a handheld, it might even take longer. With the omission of the extra shoulder buttons on the PS Vita, you'll have to get familiar with using the right analog stick. Luckily for you, it's a good alternative given time and practice. Aside from a few familiar faces, there isn't that many references to the Mega Man universe. The game does, however, retain the exciting and addictive gameplay the series is known for. With a compelling story always pushing you to play a little bit further, the shift to 3D is a welcome one. Number 3. Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I am just in complete shock as to how well this game still holds up. Maybe it's the timeless art style, or perhaps the resurgence in 2D platforming indie games. Whatever the case, Symphony of the Night is definitely a game that could be released today. It's 2D action, platform, adventure, role-playing at its finest, with a huge emphasis on exploration and non-linear level design. The side-scrolling gameplay is some of the best I've ever played. And trust me, I've played plenty of 2D side-scrollers. But I think what sets this one apart is that it's a side-scroller with brains. It's not one of those mindless action games where you spam the attack button. The enemies you encounter are a lot smarter than you'd think, requiring a little more thought as to how you go about disposing them. Not only is the combat satisfying, there's a vast array of weapons and spells to discover as well. And as fun and addictive as the gameplay is, the visuals are even better, representing some of the best hand-drawn sprites I've ever seen. But it's the fine little details and nuances that really elevate the look of the game. For example, the blood dripping from the sword of an enemy as he approaches you, or the fountain of blood that sprays from a defeated foe. Such a high attention to detail that you really don't see in 2D games anymore. And if you think that wasn't enough, the game is topped off with an amazing soundtrack. Orchestral music that perfectly suits the feeling of wandering through Dracula's undead castle. The music is so good I found myself putting the game down at times and just letting it play. Of course, I'm just scratching the surface as there's so much more to this game than previously mentioned. Take my word, this is one of the best 2D action adventure titles ever released. Number 2. Dino Crisis 2. If you are a fan of the original, then you might be in for a little surprise when coming into the sequel. The reason being is that Capcom has traded in the survival horror gameplay of the first Dino Crisis for a more action-packed arcade-style experience. I absolutely love the original, but I will admit it did have its slow parts. Ammo was scarce, the action was limited, and the puzzles felt tedious. Dino Crisis 2 has none of that. As a matter of fact, this sequel goes in the complete opposite direction, opting for pure action. It feels like the game is constantly trying to push you forward, never wanting you to slow down. This is all thanks in part to its new style of gameplay. You're awarded extinction points based on how many dinosaurs you kill, how quickly, and without taking damage. Points are then used to buy new weapons, new gear, increase ammo storage, but most importantly, at least in my opinion, to refill ammo. Yes, you no longer have to pick up ammo. As long as you have enough points and you're near a save station, you can simply refill your ammo. The game is literally run and gun. There are the occasional dino files you'll have to pick up, and puzzles are still present, but they've been simplified to the point where it's basically just hitting a button or two. It feels less like Resident Evil with dinosaurs and more like The Lost World Jurassic Park. And you know what? I don't mind it at all. It's probably because I never really expected the series to be Resident Evil with dinosaurs to begin with. The game also replaces the full 3D environments of the first game with pre-rendered backgrounds, which again in my opinion looks way better. Granted, the first Dino Crisis was in full 3D, but because of that, everything just felt empty and lifeless. At least in comparison. Environments are now full of vegetation and life. It's awesome when you're running through the field and just happen to come across a dinosaur roaming around in the background. Little touches like that are aplenty in this game, and it just adds so much to the overall experience. If you're a fan of the original but just felt like it was a little too slow, then give the sequel a try. It's action arcade-style gameplay at its finest. Number 1. Vagrant Story. Oh my goodness, the production quality for this game is off the charts. I thought I was watching a movie at first. Out of all the games I mentioned, this is by far the best looking of the bunch and one of the few that still holds up even today. The cutscenes are out of this world. The camera angles that are used, the way a scene would transition to another, the clever display of color, little touches like how a broken arrow would fall and hit the ground. There is so much attention to detail put into the simplest things. It's overwhelming and at times unbelievable at how good everything looks. You want to talk about Squaresoft being at the top of their game? Here's the proof. Too bad you can't say that about them today. Just kidding. The combat is still addictive after all these years, and even though the menu system can take a while to figure out, it's second nature once you do. The only thing I don't like is how there's no on-screen tutorial or a button prompt telling you what to do at the beginning. You're sort of just left to figure things out on your own, which is fine, but some people not familiar with that type of gameplay can be a little intimidated. If there's ever a game that was underrated, underappreciated, then Vagrant Story would have to be it. If you're a fan of JRPGs, or if you're a fan of classic Squaresoft before they sold themselves out, then please check out Vagrant Story. Now, if you want to see other PS1 games that work on the PlayStation Vita, then check out the next 2 videos. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to those who just let the video play in the background while they're off doing something else. Every little bit helps. You guys are the best. Stay healthy and stay safe.